she walked into the elegant music hall, with her head down, just another invisible worker in her faded uniform. They only noticed her when they needed someone to humiliate for their own amusement. But when they forced her to play the piano as a cruel joke, what happened next left the entire room speechless. By the time her fingers left the keys, the woman they had mocked became the woman they would never forget. Emily Johnson kept her gaze lowered, a habit formed over 3 years of working here. At 28, she had mastered the art of invisibility. The beige uniform of the custodial staff hung on her slender frame, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that hadn't changed style since she'd first pushed her cleaning cart through these hallowed halls. As she emptied a trash bin near the main performance hall, her movements were precise, efficient. Yet something in the way her fingers gripped the bag betrayed a grace that seemed oddly incongruous with her task. No one noticed. No one ever did. The building was quieter this morning, most students still at breakfast before their lessons began. Emily paused at the entrance to the empty grand hall, allowing herself 5 seconds, just 5, to look at the magnificent Steinway grand piano sitting center stage, bathed in a shaft of early sunlight streaming through the high windows. Her reflection in the polished black surface showed a woman split in two. The cleaner she was, the musician she wasn't. For just a moment, her fingers twitched at her side, playing an invisible melody only she could hear. "Emily, can you handle the reception area today? The foundation board is coming in." Mr. Collins, her supervisor, called out from across the hall, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Yes, Mr. Collins," she replied softly, the moment shattered. As she moved toward the reception area with its soaring ceilings and wall-length windows, Emily caught another glimpse of the Steinway in the corner, the centerpiece of countless recitals and fundraisers. In the reflection of a polished brass lamp, she saw herself as she once was, 15 years younger, seated at a similar piano, her future stretched before her like an unwritten symphony. Her grandmother's hands guiding hers, voice gentle but firm. "Feel the music, Emmy, don't just play it. When your fingers touch these keys, nothing else matters. Not who you are to the world, but who you are when the world falls away." Emily shook her head slightly, dispelling the memory. The past was the past. This was her life now, and she had made her peace with it. Or so she told herself each morning as she donned her uniform, each evening as she removed it, and each night as her fingers danced across the worn keys of her grandmother's upright piano in her small apartment, playing to an audience of framed photographs and faded dreams. The click of authoritative heels against marble announced Victoria Parker's arrival before Emily saw her. At 53, Victoria commanded the conservatory with the same precision she had once brought to concert stages across Europe. Her tailored navy suit and perfectly styled silver bob projected the image she had carefully cultivated: success, refinement, unquestionable authority. "Those chairs need to be exactly 1 inch apart. Not this haphazard arrangement," she instructed, barely glancing at Emily. "The Jefferson Foundation representatives expect perfection." "Yes, Mrs. Parker," Emily replied immediately, moving to adjust the chairs. From across the room, Samantha Reed observed the exchange with a barely concealed smirk. As the conservatory's star piano instructor, Samantha had built her reputation on producing competition winners and maintaining exacting standards. "Victoria, do remind the staff that they should use the service corridors when the guests arrive," Samantha called out, her voice carrying just enough to ensure Emily heard. "Last time I noticed some of them in plain sight during the Chopin competition." Emily's cheeks warmed, but her hands remained steady as she continued arranging chairs. These small humiliations had become as routine as dusting the trophy cases, expected, endured, forgotten, or at least pushed down deep where they couldn't hurt anymore. As she polished the brass handrail along the grand staircase, Emily paused at the sound of a student struggling through a difficult passage on the piano. Through the partially open door, she could see a young girl, maybe 12, her frustration evident as she repeatedly stumbled over the same measures. Without thinking, Emily whispered, "Try releasing your wrist more on the arpeggios." The girl turned, startled, just as Samantha appeared beside her. Did you just try to instruct my student? Samantha's voice cut through the air like ice. I'm sorry, You just what? Thought your expertise as a janitor qualified you to comment on piano technique. Samantha's laugh was sharp. Please stick to what you know, cleaning supplies and trash collection. Emily's eyes dropped to the floor as the door closed firmly in her face. She resumed her polishing, shoulders slightly more hunched than before. What Samantha couldn't see was Emily's fingers moving imperceptibly against the railing, tracing the notes of the piece the student had been playing, correcting, perfecting, completing the passage in a silent performance that no one would ever witness. Later that afternoon, Emily wheeled her cart toward the east wing, where sunlight streamed through tall windows onto photographs of celebrated alumni. She paused beneath a portrait of Margaret Johnson, no relation, though Emily sometimes felt a kinship with the stern-faced woman who had risen from humble beginnings to international acclaim. Dusting the dreams you couldn't catch? Jason Miller appeared beside her, his voice kind rather than mocking. At 26, he was the youngest teaching assistant at Preston and the only staff member who consistently acknowledged Emily as more than mobile furniture. Someone has to keep them shining, Emily replied with a small smile, reaching up to carefully wipe the frame. I heard Samantha earlier. Don't let her get to you. He leaned against the wall, clutching sheet music to his chest. Some people need to diminish others to feel important. Emily shrugged. I'm used to it. That doesn't make it right. Jason studied her for a moment. I've been meaning to ask. Sometimes when I work late, I hear someone playing in the practice rooms after hours. It's extraordinary. His eyes met hers with quiet understanding. Room C, usually around 8:30. Emily's hand stilled on the frame. She'd been so careful, waiting until the building was nearly empty, playing softly in the room farthest from the security desk. The acoustics are better there, she finally said, neither confirming nor denying. Jason nodded, a gentle acknowledgement passing between them. Well, whoever it is has remarkable technique, particularly with Liszt. He straightened, checking his watch. I should get to my lesson. See you around, Emily. She watched him walk away, wondering if she should find a different practice room or a different time. The thought of giving up those stolen moments made her chest tighten. They were all she had left of her former self. The following morning, Emily was meticulously cleaning fingerprints from the glass display cases when Victoria's voice echoed through the reception area. Absolutely unacceptable. The Jefferson Foundation Gala is our most important fundraising event of the year. Emily glanced up to see Victoria pacing before the reception desk, phone pressed to her ear. Nearby, Samantha hovered, her face tight with concern. What do you mean the flowers will be cream instead of white? The entire color scheme. Victoria stopped abruptly, listening. Fine, but I expect a significant discount for this inconvenience. She ended the call with a sharp tap. Everything must be perfect tomorrow night. Perfect. Samantha nodded. My student Olivia has been practicing the Liszt Hungarian Rhapsody for months. The foundation specifically requested it. Apparently, Mr. Jefferson is particularly fond of the piece. At least that's one thing we don't have to worry about. Victoria sighed, massaging her temples. Emily moved quietly around them, emptying trash bins and wiping surfaces, careful to maintain her invisibility. But as she reached for a coffee cup left on the edge of a table, her elbow knocked against a vase, making it wobble precariously. Victoria whirled around. Do be careful. That's a donation from the Miyazaki family. I'm sorry, Mrs. Parker. Emily steadied the vase, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. Perhaps you could finish this area later, Samantha suggested, her tone making it clear it wasn't a suggestion at all. We're discussing important matters. Emily nodded and began to wheel her cart away when Victoria called after her. Wait, make sure the Grand Hall floor is immaculate for tomorrow. Last time I noticed scuff marks near the stage. Yes, Mrs. Parker. And remind the other cleaning people to use the service entrance tomorrow night. We don't want them visible during the gala. Emily kept her expression neutral, though something twisted painfully in her chest. Of course. As she pushed her cart down the corridor, she heard Samantha's voice floating after her. Really, Victoria, Sometimes I think they're completely oblivious to the importance of our work here. The cultural significance. Emily's hands tightened on the cart handle. 3 years ago, when she'd first taken this job, such comments had brought tears to her eyes. Now they just left a dull ache, like pressing on an old bruise. She turned the corner and nearly collided with a student rushing past, sheet music fluttering from his hands. "Sorry," he exclaimed, dropping to his knees to gather the scattered pages. Emily knelt to help him, automatically organizing the pages in correct order. The title caught her eye, Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. "You're playing this?" she asked, handing him the neatly stacked music. "Trying to," he admitted with a rueful smile. "I'm understudying Olivia for the gala, but honestly, I'm nowhere near ready. Those octave jumps in the Friska section are killing me." Emily's fingers twitched at her side. "Have you tried thinking of it as a dance rather than a technical exercise?" Liszt wrote it to capture the spirit of Hungarian folk music, the passion, the wildness. The student looked at her with surprise, then curiosity. "That actually makes sense. Thanks." He tilted his head. "Do you play?" Before Emily could answer, Samantha's voice rang out from down the hall. "Marcus, you're late for your lesson." The student scrambled to his feet. "Coming, Ms. Reed." He gave Emily a quick nod before hurrying away. Emily watched him go, then continued pushing her cart toward the supply closet. Tomorrow night, she would polish the floors until they gleamed like mirrors, clean the bathrooms until every surface sparkled, and make herself as invisible as possible while the conservatory's elite gathered to celebrate their own importance. And perhaps, if she was lucky, she might catch a few notes of the music from her position in the shadows. The day of the annual fundraising gala arrived in a flurry of activity. Emily had been at the conservatory since dawn, polishing, dusting, and arranging, transforming the already elegant building into something truly spectacular. Every surface gleamed under her careful attention, every chair perfectly aligned at precisely the angle Victoria had specified. By late afternoon, the reception area buzzed with staff making final preparations. Florists arranged elaborate centerpieces while caterers set up serving stations. Emily moved quietly through the chaos, addressing any imperfection before anyone else could notice it. "The lighting in the main hall still isn't right," Victoria called out, striding through the double doors in a midnight blue evening gown, her silver hair swept into an elegant updo. "And someone needs to check the temperature in there. It feels stuffy." "I'll adjust the thermostat," Emily offered, already moving toward the control panel. Victoria nodded absently, her attention already shifting to her clipboard. "The first guests arrive in 2 hours. Everything must be perfect." "Yes, we know," Samantha finished, emerging from a side door. She wore an emerald dress that complemented her auburn hair, diamond earrings catching the light as she moved. Olivia just texted. She's on her way for the final sound check. Emily slipped away to the main hall, adjusting the thermostat and dimming the lights to create the warm, intimate atmosphere Victoria preferred for these events. As she worked, she allowed herself a moment to imagine what it would be like to attend such a gathering, not as someone serving or cleaning, but as someone who belonged. The thought evaporated as quickly as it had formed. Some doors remained firmly closed, no matter how much one might wish otherwise. She was arranging programs on a side table when Jason appeared beside her, looking uncharacteristically formal in a black suit. "You've done an amazing job," he said quietly, gesturing to the transformed space. "They never appreciate how much work goes into making their events perfect." Emily smiled. "It's just my job. Still." He hesitated, then added, "I heard you might be playing after hours tonight. Once everyone's gone?" Heat rose to Emily's cheeks. Don't worry," he assured her quickly. "Your secret's safe. I just wanted to say I hope you do. This place could use some real music after all the pomp and circumstance." Before Emily could respond, a commotion erupted from the reception area. They exchanged glances before hurrying toward the sound. Samantha stood in the center of the room, her face drained of color as she clutched her phone. Victoria hovered nearby, expression shifting from concern to horror. "What do you mean you're in the hospital?" Samantha's voice echoed across the marble floor. The gala starts in an hour. She paused, listening. Food poisoning? Today of all days. As Samantha ended the call, Victoria rushed toward her, pearl necklace clutched in her hand like a lifeline. What's happened? Olivia can't perform. She's in the emergency room. Victoria's hand flew to her throat. But she's our centerpiece. The Jefferson Foundation specifically requested Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. I know that, Samantha snapped, then lowered her voice. None of my other students can handle that piece without preparation. Emily continued arranging programs, trying to make herself invisible as the crisis unfolded. Inside, however, her heart had begun to beat faster, a strange sensation spreading through her chest, something between dread and an emotion she couldn't quite name. What about Marcus? He's her understudy, Victoria suggested, desperation edging her voice. He's nowhere near ready. You heard him at yesterday's rehearsal. He fell apart in the Frisca section. Samantha began pacing, heels clicking against the marble floor. We could substitute another piece, perhaps. No, Victoria interrupted firmly. Mr. Jefferson specifically mentioned how much he was looking forward to the Hungarian Rhapsody. Changing the program would be disastrous. Jason stepped forward, clearing his throat. Mrs. Parker, if I might make a suggestion? Victoria turned, desperate for solutions. What is it, Jason? He hesitated, then continued. I've heard someone else play that piece quite brilliantly, actually. Who? Professor Williams is out of town, unless you're suggesting one of the graduate students. No, actually, Jason's eyes drifted toward Emily, who was dusting a nearby display case, seemingly oblivious to their crisis. I am suggesting Emily. The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha recovered first, a laugh bursting from her lips. The janitor? You can't be serious. I've heard her playing after hours, when she thought the building was empty. Jason continued, undeterred. She's remarkable. Victoria and Samantha exchanged incredulous glances before both turning to stare at Emily, who had now frozen in place, duster suspended in midair. Is this true? Victoria demanded. You play piano? Emily lowered the duster slowly, her cheeks coloring. Yes, ma'am. And you think you could play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody? Samantha's tone made it clear how absurd she found the very suggestion. Emily hesitated, then met Samantha's eyes directly, perhaps for the first time in 3 years. Yes, ma'am. I can. Victoria's eyes narrowed as she studied Emily, seeing her, truly seeing her, for perhaps the first time. You honestly believe you could perform at our fundraising gala? Emily stood perfectly still, caught in the unexpected spotlight of their attention. Around them, staff bustled about preparing for the evening, oblivious to the drama unfolding in their midst. Let me understand this, Samantha interjected, her voice dripping with condescension. You think you can step in for Olivia Sanders, who's been training at elite institutions since she was 5? Emily's reply was simple. I know the piece. Richard Taylor, chairman of the board, approached their small circle, his curiosity piqued by the unusual tension. What's the problem, Victoria? Apparently, Victoria said with an artificial laugh. Our custodian believes she can save our gala performance. Richard's eyebrows rose slightly as he assessed Emily, his gaze traveling from her practical shoes to her simple uniform, lingering on her hands that had just been emptying trash bins and polishing surfaces. Well, he said slowly, a certain gleam appearing in his eyes, this is certainly unexpected. Samantha leaned closer to Victoria and Richard, lowering her voice, though not enough to prevent Emily from hearing. It might actually work to our advantage. We could present it as part of our community outreach efforts. If she's terrible, we make a self-deprecating joke about our desperate situation. If she's passable, we look generous for giving the help a moment in the spotlight. Victoria's expression shifted as she considered the possibilities. The donors might find it charming, a little entertainment before we explain Olivia's unfortunate situation. Emily stood silent, invisible once more as they discussed her, as if she were an object, a prop for their performance rather than a person with feelings and dignity. Her face remained carefully neutral, but inside, something that had been dormant for years began to stir. A flicker of anger, of pride, of the person she had once been before life had forced her to shrink herself to fit into smaller and smaller spaces. "It's settled then," Victoria announced, turning back to Emily. "You'll play tonight. One piece, the list. And if I refuse?" Emily's question hung in the air, surprising even herself with its boldness. Victoria's smile never reached her eyes. "Then we'll need to reassess whether your position here is still necessary. Budget cuts, you understand." The threat was clear, wrapped in the thinnest veneer of professional courtesy. Emily felt the weight of years of silent acquiescence pressing down on her, alongside the sudden, terrifying possibility of change. In that moment, Emily faced a choice that reached far beyond music. This was about her dignity, her identity, the parts of herself she had carefully hidden away. This was about standing up or backing down. She looked at Victoria, then at Samantha, and finally at Jason, whose eyes held an apology alongside his hope. Taking a deep breath, Emily made her decision. "I'll need 30 minutes to prepare," she said quietly. "And I'd like to use the practice room." Victoria nodded curtly. "Fine, but be ready. The performance begins at 8 sharp. As the group dispersed, Jason approached Emily. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't think they'd threaten your job." Emily managed a small smile. "It's okay. Maybe it's time they heard me." She walked toward the practice room, her heart pounding against her ribs. After 3 years of invisibility, she was about to step into the spotlight. Not as the person they thought she was, but as the musician she had never stopped being. The grand hall filled rapidly as 8 o'clock approached. Diamonds glittered under crystal chandeliers. Conversations hummed between patrons in evening wear, and champagne flutes clinked in delicate toasts. The room exuded wealth, privilege, and the comfortable certainty of those who had never questioned their place in the world. In the small practice room at the end of the corridor, Emily sat before an upright piano, her fingers moving silently above the keys. She had changed into the spare black dress she kept in her locker for emergencies. Nothing fancy, but at least not her uniform. Without makeup or jewelry, she still looked markedly different from the bejeweled patrons, but the simple dress lent her a quiet dignity. She closed her eyes, visualizing the Steinway grand piano waiting on stage, feeling the weight of each key beneath her fingers, hearing the music in her mind as clearly as if it were playing in the room. Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 was a piece she knew intimately, a technical challenge that had once represented everything she aspired to master. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Jason peeked in, his expression a mixture of concern and encouragement. "They're almost ready for you," he said. "How are you feeling?" Emily's hands stilled above the keys. "Like I'm 15 again, waiting for my Juilliard audition." "You were accepted to Juilliard?" Jason's eyes widened. "Another lifetime ago." She stood, smoothing her dress. "Before my grandmother's stroke, before the medical bills, before everything." Jason was quiet for a moment. "They don't deserve to hear you play," he finally said. "But maybe you deserve to be heard." Emily nodded, a small smile touching her lips. "Thank you for believing I could do this. I never doubted it." He held the door open for her. "Ready." As they walked toward the grand hall, Emily felt as though she were moving through a dream, or perhaps waking from one. The corridor seemed longer than usual, the sounds more distant, her heartbeat unnaturally loud in her ears. They paused at the entrance to the wings. On stage, Victoria was addressing the audience, her practiced smile gleaming under the spotlights. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight change to our program tonight," she announced, her voice carrying effortlessly through the hall. "Our scheduled pianist had an unfortunate emergency." She paused, her voice taking on a theatrical quality. "However, in the spirit of our community outreach initiatives, we have a special alternative performance." Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Victoria continued. "One of our maintenance staff has volunteered to demonstrate how music touches all lives, regardless of background or training." The introduction hung in the air like a veiled insult. Emily felt her cheeks warm, but kept her head high as Jason squeezed her arm in silent support. "You'll be magnificent," he whispered before slipping away to find his seat. Victoria gestured toward the wings. "Please welcome Emily Johnson." Emily walked onto the stage, the spotlight harsh against her simple dress. A few titters of laughter floated from the back of the room. She caught sight of Samantha, standing near the curtain, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips, like a cat who'd trapped a mouse for its own amusement. In the front row, Richard leaned toward his companion with a stage whisper. This should be entertaining, if nothing else. Emily approached the magnificent grand piano, its polished surface reflecting the uncertainty in her eyes. For 15 years, she had played only in empty rooms or on her grandmother's worn upright piano. Never like this, never with judgment waiting to fall on her like an executioner's blade. She sat at the bench, adjusting it slightly, her movements betraying years of practice that few in the audience could recognize. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly as the weight of what she was about to do pressed down upon her. The silence in the hall grew heavy, expectant. Emily could feel hundreds of eyes on her, waiting for her to fail, to provide them with an amusing anecdote for their next dinner party. You should have seen this cleaning woman who thought she could play Liszt. She closed her eyes, shutting out the world that had tried so hard to erase her. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she found herself sitting beside her grandmother, an old woman with arthritis-bent fingers who had once played with symphony orchestras. Music isn't about who you are to the world, her grandmother had told her, guiding her young hands over the keys. It's about who you are when the world falls away. Emily took a deep breath, and in that moment, she let the world fall away. The judgment, the expectations, the years of invisibility. She let herself become, once again, the musician she had always been beneath the uniform and the silence. Her fingers touched the keys. The first notes of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 filled the hall. Not the hesitant attempts they had expected, but confident, masterful tones that commanded attention. Emily's hands moved with precision and passion, telling a story through music that she had never been allowed to tell in words. The opening Lassen section emerged with dignified restraint, each note perfectly weighted, creating a tension that held the audience in unexpected silence. As she transitioned into the Friska, her fingers flew across the keys with stunning agility, the technical challenges that had defeated Olivia's understudy dispatched with seemingly effortless grace. The whispers died. The smirks froze. 200 breathing souls fell completely silent as the piece progressed through its demanding technical passages. Emily's body swayed with the changing moods, her face transformed by the music flowing through her. The playful sections danced with whimsical grace. The thundering crescendos resonated against the very foundations of the hall. Her left hand delivered octaves with power and precision, while her right hand executed intricate figurations that seemed to defy human capability. In the third row, an elderly patron wiped away tears. At the back, a renowned music critic who happened to be in attendance leaned forward, his expression a mixture of shock and reverence. Victoria's face had lost all color. Samantha stood rigid, her knuckles white as she gripped the curtain. And Jason watched with quiet vindication, a witness to truth revealing itself note by perfect note. As Emily approached the final cadenza, her entire being became a conduit for the music. The years of playing in secret, of maintaining her technique despite everything life had thrown at her, culminated in a performance of raw emotional power and technical brilliance that could not be denied. When she played the final thunderous chord, the hall remained suspended in silence for 3 heartbeats. Then it erupted. The applause began hesitantly at first, as if the audience couldn't quite believe what they had witnessed, before swelling into a standing ovation. Calls of bravo echoed through the hall, bouncing off marble columns and crystal chandeliers. People who moments before had been prepared to politely endure a custodian's amateur attempt were now on their feet, their faces alight with genuine emotion. Emily sat motionless for a moment, overwhelmed by the response. When she finally rose and offered a small, humble bow, The applause intensified. David Thompson, a respected conductor who had been invited as a special guest, made his way to the stage as Emily attempted to slip backstage. "Wait," he called, his authoritative voice cutting through the applause. "Young lady, where did you study?" Emily turned back, the spotlight still harsh against her simple dress. "I didn't, sir. Not formally." The murmurs resumed as David approached her. "That's impossible. Your technique, your interpretation." "My grandmother taught me," Emily said softly, her voice somehow carrying throughout the now silent hall. "Margaret Johnson." Recognition dawned in David's eyes. Margaret Johnson? The Margaret Johnson who played with the National Symphony in the 70s? Emily nodded. "She raised me after my parents died. We couldn't afford conservatory tuition, but she taught me everything she knew." Victoria stepped forward, her professional mask firmly back in place. "How fascinating. What a wonderful human interest story." "It's not a story," Emily replied quietly. "It's my life." The dignity in her voice silenced Victoria more effectively than any sharp retort could have. "I was accepted to Juilliard 15 years ago," Emily continued, looking directly at Samantha now. "But my grandmother had a stroke that same week. I stayed to care for her. By the time she passed, there were medical bills, and the opportunity was gone." David Thompson nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "So you took a job here to stay close to music?" "Yes." Emily's simple answer contained volumes about sacrifice, about dreams deferred but not abandoned, about finding ways to remain connected to what you love even when the path forward seems blocked. In that moment, standing in her simple black dress under the unforgiving spotlight, Emily Johnson became more than just the woman who cleaned their halls. She became undeniably, irrevocably human in their eyes, a person with a past, with talent, with dignity that no uniform could diminish. And as the applause continued to wash over her, Emily felt something shift inside her, not triumph or vindication, but a quiet reclaiming of self. The music had always been there, waiting. Perhaps now, finally it could be heard. The elegant reception hall buzzed with excitement as Emily stood surrounded by patrons who had never before noticed her existence. Their eyes, once sliding past her uniform as if she were part of the furniture, now sought her out with eager curiosity and newfound respect. "Your interpretation of the middle section was extraordinary," remarked a silver-haired woman who had donated the funds for the East Wing. "Such emotional depth. Where have you been hiding?" "In plain sight," Emily answered softly, a gentle truth that made the woman blink rapidly before looking away. She accepted their praise with quiet grace, neither shrinking from it nor reveling in it. The sudden attention felt surreal. These were the same people who had walked past her for years, who had left fingerprints on surfaces she would later clean, who had never once wondered about the woman behind the uniform. Across the room, Victoria Parker moved through the crowd with mechanical precision, her professional smile strained as she fielded questions about the remarkable discovery in their midst. "Of course we recognized her potential," Victoria insisted to a major donor, a portly man whose annual contributions funded 3 scholarships. "Our community outreach programs are designed precisely to nurture such hidden talents." "Fascinating approach," the man replied, his tone suggesting he wasn't entirely convinced. "Though I wonder why she was cleaning floors rather than teaching, given her obvious mastery." Victoria's smile tightened further. "We believe in meeting people where they are, Charles. Some journeys to artistic fulfillment take unconventional paths." Nearby, Samantha Reed stood alone by the refreshment table, her usual circle of admirers noticeably absent. She watched as her most promising students gathered around Emily, eyes shining with the kind of genuine admiration no credentials could command. "Ms. Johnson," one young pianist asked, "how did you manage those octave jumps so effortlessly?" "I've been struggling with that passage for months." Before Emily could respond, Jason approached with 2 glasses of sparkling water, offering her one. "I told you they'd be amazed," he said quietly. "Thank you for speaking up," Emily replied. "Not many people would have." Their eyes met in a moment of understanding, the kind that forms between two people who recognize something essential in each other. Jason had seen her when no one else had bothered to look. To answer your question, Emily turned back to the student. It's not about force, but about using the natural weight of your arm. Here, she demonstrated the motion in the air. Feel the momentum carry you through, rather than attacking each note individually. The students watched, transfixed, as Emily's hands moved with the grace of someone who had internalized the music so completely it had become part of her physical vocabulary. Before she could continue, David Thompson rejoined them, now accompanied by Elizabeth Chun, the head of the Jefferson Foundation. The crowd parted instinctively for them, the hierarchy of the room reasserting itself even in this moment of disruption. "Miss Johnson," Elizabeth began, her tailored suit and confident bearing marking her as someone accustomed to making important decisions. "Our foundation believes that talent should never be limited by circumstance. We've been searching for someone to lead our new initiative for underprivileged youth, someone who understands both musical excellence and real-world barriers." Emily's eyes widened slightly as she realized what was being offered. "The position would include teaching and performing," David added, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear. "Your story and your extraordinary talent could inspire countless young people who believe certain doors are closed to them." As they spoke, Emily noticed Richard Taylor watching from a distance, his expression unreadable. The power dynamic in the room had shifted irrevocably, like tectonic plates after an earthquake, leaving everyone to navigate unfamiliar terrain. I'm honored," Emily said, finding her voice. "But I would need to know more about what the position entails." "Of course," Elizabeth nodded approvingly. "We can discuss details tomorrow. For now, enjoy your well-deserved recognition." As Elizabeth and David moved away, Victoria approached, her composure recovered enough to present a convincing facade of pleasure. "Emily, what a delightful surprise you've given us all tonight." Her voice was honey over ice. "You should have mentioned your background when you applied for the custodial position." The implication was clear. Had Victoria known Emily's capabilities, she would never have been hired to clean. The irony wasn't lost on Emily, who had deliberately omitted her musical training from her application, knowing it would raise questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Would have made a difference, Mrs. Parker?" Emily asked quietly. Victoria's smile flickered. "Well, naturally, we try to place people where their talents can best serve the conservatory. I believe I've served the conservatory quite well these past 3 years," Emily replied, her tone respectful but firm. "Every polished surface and empty trash bin has contributed to the environment where music can flourish." Victoria seemed momentarily at a loss for words, a rare occurrence for someone who prided herself on always having the perfect response. Before she could recover, Samantha approached, her expression a carefully constructed mask of professional interest. "Your technique is impressive for someone without formal training," she said, the faint praise revealing more about her character than she perhaps intended. Though there were some interpretive choices in the second movement that were unconventional. Emily met Samantha's gaze steadily. "My grandmother always said music isn't about following rules. It's about communicating something true." Margaret Johnson said that. David Thompson had rejoined the conversation, his interest piqued. "I had the privilege of hearing her perform Rachmaninoff's Third Concerto in '78. Extraordinary musician. I see now where you get your approach to the emotional architecture of a piece." Samantha's lips pressed into a thin line as she found herself outmaneuvered in her own area of expertise. As the evening progressed, Emily felt a strange sense of displacement, as if she were watching herself from a distance. Just hours ago, she had been arranging chairs and polishing surfaces in preparation for an event she would normally have experienced only from the periphery. Now she stood at its center, the subject of attention rather than its invisible facilitator. When the reception finally began to wind down, Emily found a moment of solitude near the grand windows overlooking the conservatory gardens. The night sky was clear, stars visible despite the city lights, and she allowed herself to absorb the magnitude of what had happened, what was still happening. "It won't all be easy, you know," came a voice beside her. Richard Taylor had approached silently, his expression thoughtful as he gazed out at the same view. "I never expected it would be," Emily replied. "People like Victoria and Samantha, they've built their identities around being gatekeepers. Having someone walk through the wall rather than the gate, it challenges everything they believe about how the world works." He turned to face her. "They'll adjust, eventually, some more gracefully than others." Emily considered his words. "I'm not looking to change anyone's world but my own, Mr. Taylor." "Too late for that," he said with a small smile. "After tonight, you've changed quite a few worlds, I suspect." He nodded toward the group of students still lingering nearby, clearly hoping for another chance to speak with her, especially theirs. As Richard walked away, Emily realized the truth in his observation. Something had shifted tonight, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed her performance. A small crack had appeared in the carefully constructed hierarchy that governed institutions like Preston, a reminder that talent, passion, and humanity existed at every level, often hidden in plain sight. 3 months later, Emily walked through the same hallway she had once cleaned, now carrying sheet music instead of cleaning supplies. The transformation wasn't dramatic or instantaneous. No fairy tale ending where the janitor became a princess overnight. Reality was more nuanced, more meaningful. She still wore simple clothes, though no longer a uniform. Her new position with the Jefferson Foundation's Music Within Reach program gave her the chance to work with students from backgrounds like her own, talented kids for whom traditional paths seemed impossible. As she passed the reception area, she nodded to Victoria, who returned the gesture with a tight smile. Their relationship had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, if not warmth. Some lessons were learned slowly, if at all. In practice room 8, 8 teenagers waited for her, their faces a mix of hopeful and guarded. They came from neighborhoods where music programs had been cut, where pianos were luxuries beyond reach. "My grandmother used to say that music isn't about who you are to the world," Emily told them as she sat at the piano. "It's about who you are when the world falls away." She began to play, not the showpiece that had changed her life that night, but a simple Chopin nocturne, its gentle melancholy filling the room with quiet beauty. As her students watched, their eyes widening at what was possible, Emily finally understood. Sometimes the greatest act of courage is simply being who you are, without apology, in a world that tried to make you invisible. One of her students, a girl of 14 with worn shoes but determined eyes, leaned forward. "Ms. Johnson, do you think I could ever play like that?" Emily's hands stilled on the keys as she looked at the girl, really looked at her, in the way she herself had once longed to be seen. "Yes," she said with absolute certainty. "You can. And when you do, the world will have no choice but to listen." The girl straightened her shoulders, a small spark igniting behind her eyes. The same spark that had sustained Emily through 15 years of deferred dreams and invisible labor. Not extinguished, just waiting for enough oxygen to flame into life. As Emily resumed playing, guiding her students through the first tentative steps of their own musical journeys, she realized that her story hadn't ended that night at the gala. It had simply turned to a new page. The music continued, as it always had, as it always would, flowing through her hands into the world, making visible what had always been there, waiting to be heard. 6 months after the gala that changed everything, Emily stood backstage at the Preston Music Conservatory's annual student showcase. Not as a performer this time, but as a teacher watching her first class prepare to take the stage. "Remember to breathe," she reminded Lucia, a 16-year-old with remarkable talent who had been working as a grocery store cashier before joining the Music Within Reach program. "The music knows where it needs to go. You're just its vessel." Lucia nodded, her fingers tapping silently against her leg, practicing the Chopin ballade she would perform in just minutes. Around them, other students from Emily's program adjusted bow ties and smooth dresses, their nervous energy palpable in the close confines of the wings. These were not the typical Preston students. They came from neighborhoods where classical music was rarely heard, where pianos were found in churches rather than living rooms, where talent often went undiscovered for lack of opportunity. Yet here they stood, about to perform on the same stage where Emily had reclaimed her identity half a year earlier. 5 minutes, called the stage manager, a new hire who had never known Emily as anything but Ms. Johnson, the Foundation's rising star teacher. Emily squeezed Lucia's shoulder and stepped back, allowing her students their moment to gather themselves. As she did, she caught sight of Victoria Parker across the stage, speaking intently with a board member. Their eyes met briefly, and Victoria gave a small, professional nod, acknowledgement rather than warmth, but progressed nonetheless. The relationship between them had evolved into something resembling mutual respect, though Victoria had never directly addressed the night that had transformed Emily from invisible to indispensable. Some pride ran too deep for such admissions. "Quite the transformation," came a voice beside her. Emily turned to find Richard Taylor, his eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. "Both in you and in the conservatory." "It's a beginning," Emily replied. "There's still so much work to be done." Richard nodded. "True change happens slowly. But I've noticed something interesting in the past few months. Applications from non-traditional backgrounds have increased 40%. Your presence here matters, Emily. Not just to your students, but to everyone who sees what's possible now." Before Emily could respond, the house lights dimmed, signaling the start of the showcase. She took her place in the audience, seated between Jason, now a close friend, and David Thompson, who had become a mentor of sorts, helping her navigate the complex politics of the classical music world. As the first of her students walked onto the stage, Marco, a 17-year-old whose father worked as a janitor at a downtown office building, Emily felt a swell of emotion that threatened to overwhelm her. 6 months ago, she had stood where he now stood, terrified and resolute. Now she watched as he adjusted the piano bench with the confidence of someone who belonged there, who had earned his place through talent and dedication. His performance wasn't flawless, a few missed notes in the difficult middle section, a slightly rushed cadenza, but it carried an emotional authenticity that drew the audience in, holding them rapt until the final notes faded away. The applause was genuine, appreciative. As Marco took his bow, Emily caught sight of Samantha Reed in the third row, her expression thoughtful as she applauded. Their paths crossed rarely these days, and when they did, Samantha maintained a professional distance. But tonight, watching Marco, something in her face suggested she was actually listening, perhaps for the first time, to what these students had to say through their music. One by one, Emily's students performed, each piece a statement, each performance a small victory over circumstances that might have silenced their voices entirely. When Lucia took the stage, the last of Emily's students to perform, a hush fell over the audience. Something in the girl's presence commanded attention even before she played a single note. Her performance of Chopin's Ballade No. 1 in G minor began tentatively, but as the piece progressed, Lucia seemed to shed her nervousness like an unnecessary coat, revealing the musician beneath. By the time she reached the coda, she played with a freedom and passion that brought Emily to the edge of her seat. As the final thunderous chords resonated through the hall, Emily felt tears spring to her eyes. Not just pride in her student, though that was certainly present, but something deeper, a recognition of the circle that had completed itself. Her grandmother had passed the gift of music to her. Now she was passing it to a new generation. The audience erupted in applause. Beside Emily, David leaned over. "She reminds me of someone," he said with a knowing smile. After the showcase, the reception area filled with students, parents, faculty, and donors mingling in the afterglow of the performances. Emily moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on her students' behalf, introducing them to people who might further their opportunities. "Ms. Johnson," called a voice, and Emily turned to find Lucia being introduced to a well-dressed couple. "This is Mr. and Mrs. Abernathy from the National Youth Symphony. They were very impressed with your performance." As Emily approached, she noticed Victoria standing nearby, observing the interaction with an unreadable expression. When the Abernathy's moved on, Victoria stepped forward. Your students performed admirably tonight, she said, her tone formal but not unkind. The foundation program appears to be a success. Thank you, Emily replied. They've worked incredibly hard. A brief silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken history. Finally, Victoria spoke again, her voice lower. I've been reviewing our community engagement initiatives. The board feels we should expand our outreach efforts, perhaps in collaboration with your program. Emily recognized the olive branch for what it was. Not an apology, but an acknowledgement. I think that could be valuable for everyone involved, she said carefully. Victoria nodded once, decisively. Good. We'll discuss details later. She turned to leave, then paused. That girl, Lucia. She has exceptional potential. Yes, she does, Emily agreed. See that she gets the opportunities she deserves. With that, Victoria moved away, already engaged in conversation with another board member. Emily watched her go, understanding the layers beneath Victoria's words. In her own way, Victoria was acknowledging what the night of the gala had forced her to see, that talent and worthiness existed beyond the narrow confines of privilege and tradition. Later, as the reception wound down, Emily found herself alone at the grand piano where she had played Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, not playing, just feeling their cool smoothness beneath her fingertips. Do you miss it? Asked Jason, approaching with 2 glasses of sparkling water. The performing, Emily accepted the glass with a smile. Sometimes, but I find I'm more fulfilled helping my students find their voices than I am expressing my own right now. You could do both, you know. The foundation would support you. She nodded, considering. Perhaps, but for now, this feels right. They stood in comfortable silence, watching as the last of the guests departed. The conservatory felt different to Emily now. No longer a forbidden temple where she didn't belong, nor simply a workplace where she remained invisible. It had become something else entirely, a place of possibility. I have something for you, Jason said suddenly, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew an envelope and handed it to her. It came to the office last week. Emily opened it curiously. Inside was a formal letter from the Juilliard School addressed to her. As she read, her breath caught. They're offering me a position as a guest lecturer for the summer program, she said, disbelief coloring her voice. How did this happen? David might have mentioned your name to some people, Jason admitted. But it was your performance at the Regional Education Conference last month that sealed it. Apparently, the dean was in attendance. Emily stared at the letter, emotions washing over her in waves. 15 years ago, she had dreamed of walking through Juilliard's doors as a student. Now she was being invited as a teacher. Life takes unexpected turns, she said softly. Indeed it does, came another voice. They turned to find Richard approaching, his expression pleased as he noticed the letter in Emily's hand. I see the news has reached you. You knew about this? I may have been consulted, he acknowledged with a small smile. They're getting an exceptional musician and teacher, and we'll be expecting you back in the fall. Your students need you. Emily nodded, touched by his confidence in her. I wouldn't have it any other way. As they walked together toward the exit, Emily paused to look back at the grand hall, now empty and dimly lit. 6 months ago, she had walked onto that stage as a last resort, a desperate measure, a potential source of entertainment. She had walked off it as herself, fully seen, perhaps for the first time in 15 years. You know, Richard said thoughtfully, following her gaze, institutions like Preston have existed for centuries on the premise that excellence is rare and access should be limited. What you've shown us, what your students showed us tonight, is that excellence is everywhere if only we have the wisdom to recognize it. Emily considered his words as they stepped out into the cool evening air. Above them, stars punctuated the dark sky, distant but brilliant. My grandmother used to say that music finds its way into the world through whatever door is left open, she said. Our job is just to keep opening doors. As they walked down the steps of the conservatory, Emily felt a sense of completion, not an ending, but a circle joining itself. The path that had seemed broken 15 years ago had not been destroyed, merely redirected. It had led her here, to this moment, to these students, to this purpose. And as for the future, it stretched before her now like an unwritten symphony, full of possibilities she was finally ready to explore. 1 year after the night that changed everything, Emily stood in the doorway of practice room C, the same room where she had once played in secret after her cleaning shifts, where she had prepared for her unexpected performance at the gala. Today, it looked different. New acoustic panels lined the walls. The old upright piano had been replaced with a carefully restored Yamaha, and colorful artwork from local schools brightened the previously austere space. This was now the heart of the Music Within Reach program, which had expanded beyond Emily's initial group of students to include over 40 young musicians from underserved communities. What had begun as an experimental initiative had grown into the Jefferson Foundation's flagship program, with Emily as its director. She checked her watch, 8:30 a.m., exactly 1 year to the day since she had stood trembling backstage, about to step into the spotlight. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. Reminiscing, David Thompson appeared beside her, his eyes taking in the transformed space. "Just appreciating the journey," Emily replied with a smile. "Did you find everything you need for the masterclass?" David nodded. "All set up in the main hall. Though I suspect your students might teach me as much as I teach them." That young man, Carlos, his interpretation of the Beethoven was unlike anything I've heard. "He has a unique perspective," Emily agreed. "He says the Appassionata reminds him of his neighborhood. Moments of tension and conflict, but also profound beauty and resolution." They walked together toward the main building, passing students hurrying to morning classes, faculty with coffee cups and sheet music, and the occasional maintenance staff member. Emily made a point of greeting each custodian by name, a small gesture that hadn't gone unnoticed by others at the conservatory. As they crossed the central courtyard, Victoria Parker approached, impeccably dressed as always, though Emily had noticed subtle changes in the past year. The conservatory director moved with the same authority, but less rigidity, her interactions with students and staff marginally warmer. "Emily, David," she nodded to them both. "Everything prepared for today's events?" "Yes, thank you," Emily replied. "The students are looking forward to performing at the anniversary gala tonight." Victoria's eyes met Emily's briefly. "It seems fitting, doesn't it? A full circle moment." The acknowledgement, however subtle, was significant coming from Victoria. In the past year, their professional relationship had evolved from tense tolerance to something approaching mutual respect. Victoria had never directly addressed what happened that night, her misjudgment, the attempted humiliation, but her actions had gradually shifted. The Music Within Reach program now received prime practice space, performance opportunities, and even direct funding from the conservatory itself. "Indeed it does," Emily agreed, "though I believe we're just getting started." Victoria's lips curved in what might almost have been a genuine smile. "The board meeting went well yesterday. Your proposal for the summer intensive program was approved unanimously." Emily couldn't hide her surprise. The summer program had been her most ambitious pitch yet. 6 weeks of intensive training for students without access to quality music education, complete with room and board, instrument loans, and master classes with renowned musicians. "That's wonderful news." "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Victoria said, already turning to leave. "The program's results speak for themselves. The data on student progress is quite compelling." As Victoria walked away, David chuckled softly. "High praise indeed. I believe that's the closest she's ever come to saying I was wrong about you." Emily shook her head, smiling. Baby steps. The afternoon found Emily in her office, a modest space, but one with a window overlooking the conservatory gardens. On her desk sat framed photographs, one of her grandmother at the piano, another of Emily's first class of students at their debut recital, and a newer edition, Emily receiving an award from the State Arts Council for Educational Innovation. A knock at the door interrupted her review of applications for the summer program. Samantha Reed stood in the doorway, a manila folder in her hand. "Do you have a moment?" she asked, her tone professional if not warm. "Of course." Emily gestured to the chair across from her desk. What can I help you with? Their interactions over the past year had been minimal and strictly professional. Samantha had maintained a careful distance, neither hostile nor friendly, seemingly unsure how to categorize Emily in her rigidly defined world. I've been reviewing applications for the fall semester, Samantha began, opening the folder. This student, Lucia Reyes, has applied for advanced placement in the piano program. Emily nodded. Lucia had been one of her first students, the girl who had performed Chopin so brilliantly at the showcase 6 months earlier. Her audition was exceptional, Samantha continued, sounding almost reluctant to admit it. Technically proficient, but more importantly, she has something to say. A rare quality in someone so young. Yes, she does, Emily agreed, waiting for Samantha to reach her point. The scholarship committee has approved a full tuition waiver, but there are other expenses, housing, meals, materials. Samantha hesitated. I'm wondering if your program might bridge that gap. Emily studied Samantha's face, recognizing what this conversation was costing her. For Samantha, this wasn't just about one talented student. It was an admission that excellence could emerge from unexpected places, that her understanding of who belonged in classical music might have been limited. We can certainly help with housing and expenses, Emily said. But I'd like to propose something else as well. Lucia has extraordinary potential as both a performer and a teacher. Perhaps she could assist with your beginning piano classes while she studies. It would provide her with valuable experience and a small stipend. Samantha looked surprised, then thoughtful. A student teaching assistant from the foundation program? It's unorthodox. Sometimes unorthodox approaches yield the best results, Emily replied, a gentle reminder of her own journey. After a moment, Samantha nodded. I'll consider it. She certainly has the necessary skills. She closed the folder and stood to leave, then paused. Your students are fortunate to have you, Ms. Johnson. Coming from Samantha, it was high praise indeed. Thank you, Emily said simply. I'm fortunate to have them. After Samantha left, Emily sat quietly, absorbing what had just happened. The conservatory was changing, slowly, sometimes reluctantly, but changing nonetheless. And perhaps more remarkably, so were the people within it. That evening, the grand hall filled once again with the conservatory's most generous patrons, board members, and musical luminaries. The anniversary gala was the highlight of Preston's social calendar, a celebration of tradition and excellence. But this year was different. On the program, alongside performances by internationally acclaimed musicians and the conservatory's top students, was a special segment featuring the Music Within Reach ensemble. 10 young musicians from Emily's program, performing a piece they had composed collaboratively under her guidance. Backstage, Emily helped Carlos adjust his bow tie while Lucia paced nervously, her formal dress a stark contrast to the worn jeans and t-shirt she had worn at her first lesson a year ago. What if I mess up? Lucia whispered. Everyone important will be out there. Emily placed her hands gently on the girl's shoulders. Look at me, she said quietly. You're not performing for them. You are sharing something true about yourself through music. That's all any of us can do. Lucia took a deep breath and nodded. Like you did. That night. Like I did, Emily agreed. And remember, you belong on that stage as much as anyone else performing tonight. As her students took their positions, Emily slipped into the wings, her heart full. From this exact spot a year ago, she had watched Victoria introduce her as one of our maintenance staff, a novelty act meant to fill time until the real performers could be explained. Now, Richard Taylor himself stepped to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our next performance. Over the past year, the Music Within Reach program, under the brilliant direction of Emily Johnson, has transformed how we think about musical education and accessibility. Tonight, these remarkable young musicians will perform an original composition titled Invisible No More. Please welcome them warmly. The applause was genuine, expectant rather than obligatory. As the young ensemble began to play, a piece that wove together classical structures with influences from their own diverse cultural backgrounds, Emily felt a hand slip into hers. They're magnificent, Jason whispered beside her. Just like their teacher. Emily squeezed his hand in response, too moved to speak. Their friendship had deepened over the past year, gradually evolving into something more. Though both were taking things slowly, mindful of the professional boundaries they needed to maintain at the conservatory. When the performance ended, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Emily watched as her students took their bows, their faces alight with the unique joy that comes from being truly seen and heard. Later, as the formal portion of the evening concluded and guests mingled in the reception area, Emily found herself approached by a steady stream of people. Donors interested in expanding the program, music educators seeking collaboration, parents hoping their children might audition. "Ms. Johnson," called a familiar voice. Emily turned to find Richard and Victoria approaching with an elderly gentleman she didn't recognize. "There's someone who would very much like to meet you." "Emily, this is Harold Chambers," Victoria said, a note of deference in her voice that Emily had never heard before. "He's the chairman of the National Endowment for Musical Education." The distinguished-looking man extended his hand. "Ms. Johnson, your program has caught our attention. We're particularly interested in your methods for identifying and nurturing talent in communities typically underserved by classical music education." "That's very kind of you," Emily replied, shaking his hand. "Though I can't take credit for the method, my grandmother used similar approaches in her community teaching." "Margaret Johnson was your grandmother, I understand," Mr. Chambers nodded. "I had the privilege of hearing her perform once, years ago. A remarkable musician. She would have loved to see this program," Emily said softly. She always believed music belonged to everyone, not just those who could afford lessons or attend concerts. "A philosophy the endowment is increasingly embracing," Mr. Chambers said. "Which brings me to why I wanted to meet you. We're launching a national initiative to transform music education access. We'd like you to help shape it." As Mr. Chambers outlined the opportunity, a position that would allow Emily to expand her work nationally while maintaining her role at the foundation, she caught sight of her students across the room. They stood together, still in their performance attire, looking around the elegant reception with wide eyes and barely contained excitement. Tomorrow they would return to neighborhoods where classical music was rarely heard, where opportunities were limited, where talent often went undiscovered. But they would return different, carrying with them the knowledge that they belonged in this world too, that their voices mattered, that music could be a bridge between the life they knew and the future they imagined. "Ms. Johnson," Mr. Chambers prompted, awaiting her response. "I would be honored to help," Emily said, turning back to him. "But with one condition. The program must include pathways for students to become teachers themselves. The cycle only continues if they can pass on what they've learned." Mr. Chambers smiled. "I couldn't agree more." As the conversation continued, Emily felt a sense of completion that went beyond professional satisfaction. 1 year ago, she had stood on that stage not by choice, but by necessity, forced to reveal a part of herself she had carefully hidden away. That moment of vulnerability, terrifying as it had been, had cracked open a door not just for her, but for every student who would come after her. Later, as the gala wound down, Emily found herself alone in the grand hall. The lights had been dimmed, the stage empty save for the magnificent Steinway piano. She walked slowly toward it, her footsteps echoing in the empty space. Sitting at the bench, she placed her hands lightly on the keys, the same keys that had changed the course of her life exactly 1 year ago. She began to play, not Liszt this time, but a simple melody her grandmother had taught her as a child. Clear, unadorned notes filled the hall, a musical line so honest it needed no embellishment. "I thought I might find you here," came a voice from the shadows. Jason walked down the center aisle, his tie loosened, jacket slung over his shoulder. Emily continued playing softly as he sat beside her on the bench. "Just saying thank you," she explained. "To the piano, to this place, to whatever twist of fate brought me here." "I think it was more than fate," Jason said quietly. "It was courage. Your courage." She smiled, the melody flowing uninterrupted from her fingers. "Perhaps, but also the courage of my students, of my grandmother, of everyone who refuses to be defined by other people's expectations." They sat in companionable silence as Emily finished the piece, the final notes lingering in the air like a question answered. "What happens now?" Jason asked. "With the national program, Emily looked around the grand hall. At the stage where she had once been invisible, then exposed, then finally seen for who she truly was. At the seats where her students had sat in wonder at their first classical concert. At the world that had once seemed so impenetrable and was now, improbably, opening its doors. Now, she said with quiet certainty, we keep playing, we keep teaching, we keep reminding the world that music isn't about who you are on the outside. It's about who you are when everything else falls away." As they walked together through the empty conservatory, past practice rooms where Emily had once cleaned floors and now taught lessons, she felt the presence of her grandmother walking beside her, not as a ghost or memory, but as a continuation, a thread connecting past to present to future. Emily Johnson, once invisible, now moved through the world fully seen, not just as the woman who had played Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody with unexpected brilliance, but as herself, teacher, musician, bridge builder. Her true performance wasn't that single night on stage, but every day since, as she helped others find their own music, their own voice, their own way of being seen in a world too quick to look away. And in that continuous, everyday performance lay a truth more powerful than any single moment of recognition could provide, that sometimes the most beautiful music comes from those who have learned to play through silence, and the most profound teachings from those who understand what it means to be unheard.